Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome. We're just giving it a minute or two to allow our virtual community members to get settled into this virtual learning space. I am Dr. Nika White. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the proud founder and lead principal consultant for NWC. So I want to shout out the NWC team for always working tirelessly week after week for the past 4.5 years to allow us to bring this virtual learning experience to the broader community. If you would go to the chat, let us know where you are joining the conversation from today. That is always a treat for us to see the many different states and geographies represented, including those who are outside of the US. We are so glad you're here. We know you could be doing so many other things during this hour, but the fact that you are here with us means a lot. And we do promise to ensure a great hour of productive dialogue and insightful information that we can share and impart into you. I'm seeing Charlotte, North Carolina that's represented. Thank you. Continue to share where you are joining the conversation from today. And while you all are doing that, I want to let you know that if you're here a part of our Zoom community, then cameras are always encouraged. We love to see smiling faces, but we certainly recognize that many of you join in a capacity maybe where you're multitasking, or maybe you're just kind of listening in. And whatever capacity in which you're here, we are grateful and we don't take it for granted that you're spending this hour with us. And so welcome again. I also want to extend a special welcome to those who are live on LinkedIn. We do go live on LinkedIn every week during this hour. A lot of people like to get this content by just connecting to the LinkedIn Live. However in which you are here, we are grateful. Make sure that if you are a part of the LinkedIn Live audience, that you're using the comment section. We are bringing all of that commentary and those sentiments and expressions into our Zoom chat as well to make sure that we are extending proximity to those who may be on LinkedIn Live. We want to create a strong sense of community for all of us as we learn with and from each other today. At NWC, we really do value disability inclusion, and one of the ways in which we show up in that regard is we make intentional conversations available with closed captions. So I want to make sure that you know that that is available for those who can benefit from it. Once again, this is Intentional Conversations VodCast, where we intersect dialogue of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice, accessibility, all the things with leadership and business. Welcome to the show. We hope that you enjoy our time together today. Let the conversations begin indeed, and that is precisely what we're going to do. If you're just tuning in, you have joined Intentional Conversations VodCast, and we do extract the audio and make it available in podcast capacity as well. If you've been with us, you know that we like to always kick off the Intentional Conversations VodCast with just acknowledging some of the national observances that are happening. And August is National Black Business Month. Yes, we're in day 2 of August. And as a Black business founder, it's always important to me to make sure that I am amplifying all of the contributions of Black business owners, but also making sure that you all are aware that it takes every single one of us to create that level of intentionality of support and being able to scale and build capacity. So support Black-owned businesses. That really is significant. And I'll also just share with you that August is the month of Black philanthropy. That is something that's really dear and near to my heart. I have a foundation, my husband and I, Carlo and Nika White Foundation, and we have some special things that are coming up in this month to really highlight and amplify Black philanthropy. And so stay tuned for more on that. I have LinkedIn Learning course number 4 that's going to be releasing relatively soon. And here's what I'll say about it. While I cannot tell you the precise title just yet, it is so timely. And I'll give you a hint by teasing you just to simply say, right now, we need to really be focused on how do we ensure civil discourse during this climate where it's a high stakes election and there's so much that people are holding by way of anxiety and stress. And that certainly can show forth in how in which we interact and build and cultivate relationships. There is a keen difference between free speech and hate speech, and that is the topic that I will be covering in that new LinkedIn Learning course to be released in this month, any day now, so stay tuned for that. I've shared before that if you know of folks in your network that like to get their content by podcast and they can't make this hour live, they always have the ability to go anywhere where they like to get their podcast content. We do extract the audio, as I mentioned before, but If someone is really interested in getting the replay, you can go back to our YouTube channel. We have all of our content from past intentional conversations out there. So check out the replay as well. But multiple ways in which we like to extend information to our broader community. Now is the time within the show that I give you a little bit of what you have to look forward to in terms of upcoming weeks and the guest co-hosts that we're going to be welcoming. And so let me just put that into your hearing quickly. On August 9th, next Friday, we're going to be welcoming Ty Christensen. And in that Intentional Conversation podcast, we're going to be discussing navigating the mortgage industry as a Black woman, increasing access to home ownership in communities of color, and financial trauma experienced by communities of color during the Great Recession. So a topic that certainly I hope that you're interested in learning more about. So join us on the 9th for that conversation. And then on August 16th, I'm so excited about this. We are going to have Elaine Lynn Herring. And in that conversation, it's going to be all about ways we learn silence, ways leaders unintentionally silence people and the harm that that creates and all the implications surrounding that, as well as practical ways to create a culture of voice for your team. She has a new book out, and I'm so excited about the momentum that she is gaining with this really important message. So I hope that you will join us on the 16th for that conversation with Elaine. And then also in August, we have another guest co-host, and that is Suzanne Margriga. And in that Intentional Conversation podcast, we are going to be talking about how companies can maximize their profits, why psychology is important to reaching your profit goals, and tax strategies implemented by high net worth entrepreneurs that can also work for the rest of us, right? Those who may not look like the dominant culture, and I mean say dominant culture in the US, right? Okay, so I hope that you will join us for those upcoming Intentional Conversations podcast. Now, it does me great pleasure to read the formal bio of our guest co-host today. If you've been with us for quite some time, you know that it is critically important for me to make sure that our audience knows the accolades, the credentials, the deep experience in which our guest co-hosts show up to the conversation with. And I do that by reading their full bio just to honor and show respect for all of the many ways in which they are well informed on the topics that we're going to be discussing. So I am so excited to welcome my friend today, Daisy Auger-Dominguez, and she is a forward-thinking global leader recognized for her role in driving organizational transformations at the leading edge of people and culture. Her approach integrates people, culture, diversity, equity, inclusion, and social impact practices with business objectives. Driven by a deep commitment to sharing what she's learned, she's authored Inclusion Revolution, the essential guide to dismantling racial inequity in the workplace, and the highly anticipated Burnt Out to Lit Up, how to reignite the joy of leading people. Her insights extend to the stage where her TEDx talk, Inclusion Revolution, outlines a dynamic blueprint for building meaningful and lasting change in the workplace. She is a sought-after speaker and advisor. Daisy has applied her expertise, creating value and enhancing performance across a broad reach of industries and sectors, leading human capital practices at Vice Media, Moody's Investors Service, the Walt Disney Company, Google, and Viacom. Her insights have been featured in Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Ideas.TED, and several leadership books. Her contributions have earned her prestigious honors, including Hispanic Executives, Top 10 Leaders, People in Espanol, 25 Most Powerful Women, Add Color Legend, Brooklyn Community Services Social Impact Award, Council of Urban Professionals Change Agent, Walter Kites Foundation Change Maker, and the New York City Council Leadership and Community Service Awards. Wow. Daisy is actively contributing to opportunities for future generations by serving on the board of trustees at Bucknell University, her alma mater, and she lives in Brooklyn, New York with her husband and daughter. So you know what to do right now, VodCast community. Let's find those accolades, find those reactions, those emojis, and let's let Daisy know how grateful we are to have her here with us today. I'm going to add her to the spotlight, and I'll just share that one of the traditions here, before we release our guest co-host to greet the audience in their own way, we often ask for them to share something with us that we would not know from hearing your bio, which we've just did, or from looking at your LinkedIn profile. And I am so excited you're here. Welcome, friend.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is lovely, and I love to see all the images and of everyone that's here today. Thank you for joining us today as well. You know, I speak so often about this, but I think what you don't see on paper is that, you know, I am the daughter of you know, Ray Dominguez and Daisy Colon, Dominican and Puerto Rican teenagers who had me when they were 15 and 16. I was born here in New York City, but I was raised in the Dominican Republic by my paternal grandparents. And then I came back. So I like to joke that I did the opposite migratory pattern. So I have this unique perspective built on growing up as part of the majority in a Caribbean island, but also going to an international school where I had friends from all over the world. And then coming back to the States and being put in this box, right? This Hispanic box, monolithic view of a people that we all know to be a lot more complex and nuanced. So that early development in my life really has shaped how I see the world, and what I hope to see for so many, which is the true meaning of diversity and inclusion and belonging in the world.
The true meaning of diversity and inclusion and belonging in the world. Thank you. That is so beautifully said. And Daisy, we're so glad that you are in the trenches of this work with so many of us that care deeply about it. It actually brings me to share the next thing. Before the top of the hour, I indicated that I was on the call that Mary Frances Winters and Dr. Shirley Davis have put on this week for DEI leaders, just to be in community, to stand together in solidarity around all that we could be experiencing as we're navigating this tumultuous time. And out of that, the one singular message that I know resonated with so many people was to be DEI proud. And so I see that actually Marisha Reese with the Winters Group is here today joining us. But I just want to lean into that for a moment, because I think that it's so important for us to mobilize and to ensure that we are remaining positive and hopeful, while yet and still we are anchoring ourselves for what we know is probably going to be a really intense next several months, right? But I just want to give you a chance to kind of socialize around what's coming up for you as you just reflect on what has occurred with all the different groups mobilizing around this really common goal of helping to protect democracy and all the things that we know have been threatened, and just your take on the outcomes that you're hoping will help service us well. And when I say us, I mean those of us who are in the trenches of this work every single day.
Yeah, you know, I think about this often. You know, I talk about the fact that I've been doing this work before it was trending, right?
Right.
I started, you know, 2 decades ago at Moody's Investor Service, when I was the one person that would go to the Black MBA conferences, the Asian MBA conferences, the Latino MBA conferences, and someone just kind of looked at me and said, "I was like, do you want to run this new diversity function?" Nobody knew what it was about. I had no idea what it was about. It was in HR, which I had never worked in, right? I had started my career on the business side of credit analysis. And here I was in the function most loved to be hated, and you know, and most misunderstood, starting a career that really it changed my life, and it is what I was meant to do. So when we say we're DEI proud, we are proud of the legacy of this work, right? We are proud of the potential of this work, and we are proud also with the understanding that mistakes are made, right? That lessons
Yes,
are learned.
yes.
But you know, I always say this, and this is my professional trajectory has been very much about working in corporate organizations and, you know, and understanding business. And as someone who understands how business runs, it's always surprising to me that in moments like this, we're going to cut our DEI functions, right?
Yeah.
We're going to reduce all of this because and the reasons are, you know, economic conditions and political conditions and whatnot. But we never like get rid of entire marketing functions when the economy goes down. We don't get rid of product function when a product goes wrong, right? We
Right.
make reductions, we rebuild strategies, we reset and focus on how to do this better so that, so that the next round will be well funded and will yield the results that we want. And that's the energy that I do see. And I see that in many organizations. I see organizations that are using this time to interrogate, what are we doing? How do we do it? What are the outcomes we're trying to achieve? How do we do this efficiently, right? From a resourcing perspective, but also from a strategic and operational perspective, right? How do we execute this work better? I think those are the organizations that will succeed. Those are the organizations that will thrive. And those that are giving up altogether, I think it's to their detriment. And so I'm much more focused on those who are trying to lead this work and do this better, right? That are spending the time in deep introspection and reflection and acknowledgement. Some things didn't work, and that is fine, but that is actually life, right? That is
Right.
that is business, that is organizational design, that is organizational structure, right? It's being willing to admit what has gotten us here may not get us there. Let's
Absolutely. Yeah, let's figure it out, but don't abandon the work. So, yes, you are singing from a songbook that I also, listen to and play every single day because I do see that there are a lot of individuals who are leaving the work, and I don't place any judgment on anyone. We all have to assess and account for ourselves what kind of emotional capacity we have to navigate what's happening, this day and time. But I love the fact that there are still a large percentage of DEI practitioners who are deeply entrenched, and the work is the work. If we have to kind of modify it, that's fine. But we're staying committed to the work being valuable, and we want to make sure that we are amplifying that message, especially during a time where we hear so much loudness around the devaluing of the work. I think we have to amp up the volume on our perspective as well. And it just brings me to what we're seeing right now. I think that I know I have witnessed a lot of headlines from different media outlets. And I know that your background is heavily into the media Marcom space, but I've been seeing a lot of headlines that I believe are maybe intentionally trying to create this heightened tension and this heightened anxiety just with the language that's being used around, people getting rid of their DEI initiatives. And what are your thoughts about that? Do you think that the media is playing into some of the fear that a lot of people have right now?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And those who are doing it irresponsibly, right? They
Yeah.
get clicks to, or
Yep.
to satisfy the demands of, of their leadership. Again,
Right.
I should say, and you and I have done this work for some time, like DEI has always been questioned, right? And
Yes. Yes.
DEI practitioners have always been devalued, right? Like this isn't new. This isn't this, these ebbs and flows exist all the time. I remember I think it was in March of 2020 or like maybe in April, I wrote a piece to DEI practitioners saying, hey, listen, we've been through this before, because I started
Yep.
seeing right during the pandemic when people were making cuts, right? And
Yep.
the programs were, this was pre George Floyd
Yep.
getting murdered. But I remember writing a note and saying, like, keep the pace, right? Like stay steady
Yeah.
work. It's still necessary. Make the necessary adjustments, do what needs to be done. Of course, about a month later, George Floyd was murdered, tragically, and which, and it launched this global reckoning
Yeah.
and introspection about race that for many of us we had lived with most of our lives, but for others it was the first time that they were forced to confront it. And all of us,
Yes.
the budgets that didn't exist a month before were found, right?
Yeah.
The attention, right? Because we are reactive, right? And the media plays into it. All of a sudden we had, the blackout images of these,
Yep.
supporting Black Lives Matters, and employees saying, nah, 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 you
Yep.
don't get to tell people, right? You don't get to signal your, your values and your, and your moral purity when you are mistreating employees, right? And so
Right.
in those moments, I think that really started, I mean, it had obviously social media had been launching this proximity to this work for some time, but that started a conversation that was very much about content creators, right? And everyone is a content creator, but also the media sort of chiming in on it, and and escalating, right, and just sensationalizing things unnecessarily. I think what you're seeing now is in some of the more responsible outlets trying to just really dig at what's really happening. What is this anti-DEI rhetoric about? Where, where do we find the pockets of who's doing this work well,
Right.
and isn't? And then you have those who are just, riling it up. And every time I see a headline like "Is DEI dead?" All of these things, like I know what these headlines are for, right? They're
Right.
draws to read it. But they're irresponsible because at the end of the day, like, they're cutesy terms for something that really means people's worthiness and lives, right? Like that's what I struggle with, of, making this a fodder for gossip and, or humor, reduces the fact that when this work isn't being done, it's not just about economic stability, which is incredible for so many people, but
Right.
it's about our safety, right? It's about
Yes.
our worthiness. And by
Yes.
our, I mean a broad swath of our society,
Everyone.
just 5 people, right?
Right.
That
Right.
I think is what gets to me, and I try to look at those, and I try to think of, for those of us who may, know some, be into music, I was like, don't believe the hype, right? Like I was like, just I have to remind myself, like, don't believe the hype. That's
Don't
not.
believe the hype. I love it. Don't believe the hype. Yes. I just want to acknowledge some of what's happening in the chat right now. So earlier when we were talking about DEI proud, I encouraged individuals to go to the chat and share what it means to be DEI proud. And Carol said to keep going, to keep moving forward. So she's kept going is exactly what we're talking about now. And then Heidi shared to acknowledge the humanity of others, which is also exactly what we're talking about right now. At the core, this is about humanity. And so I love that people are really gravitating to this message of being DEI proud. So as we were talking about the media, I can't help but to also bring to this conversation what's been top of mind for so many people this week as we've seen it unfold in the media. And you're smiling because you're like, I know what's next. But National Association of Black Journalists had their convention, and
Mhm.
Donald Trump was there as a speaker. And let me say this before I actually go into opening it up, just for your reactions and your thoughts. I this week have been so proximate to this notion of being able to navigate both trauma and joy at the same time. And I say that because while I am like so many others, I think that it was a completely bad call on NABJ's part to have Donald Trump there. I also want to say that the clips that I have seen of Rachel Scott and how she handled herself was beautiful. So I want to just, understand that there's some tension points around this, but I also want to give flowers where I think flowers are due to someone who was brave enough to take on that task. And anyway, so those are my sentiments. But Daisy, as you've been watching this unfold this week, you've seen the commentary. What's your reaction to it?
I mean, I had a similar reaction, to yours and many others. My first reaction was like, who approved this? Right? Like where were the pressure points? Because, for those of us who have, run organizations and, events like this, that there's a million people that have to be pleased. And so I
Yes,
can think,
yes.
what was the decision-making criteria here? How did this work? I think it's, those who have chosen to not attend, and to make a public statement about that. I think, I think that's valuable. I think those that were there, it's also valuable, right, to listen. I mean, unfortunately, we all, like, he's a known entity, right?
Yeah.
We know that what he's going to say is going to be full of hate and vitriol and be maybe 5% right, right? Like, that's like, we know all of that. So I don't want to feed into more of that. I think, I've seen some of the, the pieces, the news pieces that have come out afterwards, and he certainly is trying to cater to a demographic that he knows he can, if he can get a percentage of that demographic, right? He's just trying to he's buying for votes. That's what it is. But I do think that it is our responsibility journalists, any sector and industry that we are, is to truly interrogate what is being said, not for the purpose of glamorizing it and
Right.
or giving more attention, which is
Thank
really
you.
the challenge here, but to truly interrogate and then speak the truth about the damaging social, economic, and political impact of what another Trump presidency would look like for our country, which I
Yeah.
fundamentally believe would destroy our democracy.
Yeah, absolutely. I do as well. And I have been seeing a few different philosophies about the NABJ's decision. You know, some have also expressed that for those that maybe were on the fence for whatever reason, that seeing the reactions and the commentary that was shared by Donald Trump, it has, you know, allowed them to be much more sensitized to what they've been hearing from others in their ear about the harm that could occur if he were to get the role of president. And so I don't know. I mean, I think that we have to all kind of assess things for ourselves and interrogate the why behind it. But I certainly did not want this moment to you know, be clouded by the fact that Rachel was assigned and she showed up, and I think she showed up beautifully. So I just wanted to give a head nod to that. This is also the conversation where Donald Trump mentioned that our VP Harris was Indian forever and then all of a sudden turned black. So that has stirred up a lot of yeah, commentary as well. To me, it gets comical at some point because it's like, ugh, I think you're showing all the things about yourself and it's not working to your benefit. But nonetheless, I don't want to stay there too long.
I,
Let's
I
talk
will
now.
say, I will say
Yeah.
that's the danger of those comments. Last night I had dinner with a friend of mine who's South Asian, who made a similar comment, and it was, I think, very much in reaction to the comments that Trump had made. And it was a moment of me being able to say, I was like, you need to fact check that. This is a woman who has spoken about her Indian mother. Her every time that I think I have seen it, I was like, this is, and by the way, also, we don't have any business telling people who in their family they're going to be identifying with or not, because we know the complexity of intersectionality, right? Like,
Right.
that's what that is. It like he just doesn't know what intersectionality is. He doesn't know what it is
Mhm.
to live in multiple identities. He doesn't know what it is to honor and love
He
and
doesn't
live
care.
complex cultural and racial identities, right? So
Yeah.
making that statement, it sends a message to folks that they may not even know. I'm like, oh, maybe she hasn't really cared about her South Asian, or she hasn't cared
Yeah.
about her Black community. I was like, and it is not true. But
Yeah. Absolutely.
the fact is that all those truth points, they're out there, right? You just
Yeah.
willing to look at them and not buy into these one-liners that
Yeah.
for some reason become the truth that people hang on to.
Yeah, for those of you who follow Joy Reid, she's really good about the fact checking. So if you want to kind of stay in the know, don't want to have to do all the legwork yourself, just follow Joy Reid. You will definitely get the 911 there. Okay, so I want to shift and I want to talk about the Olympics because lots of great things have been happening in the Olympics this week, and something that I know many people have taken a notice of is how Simone Biles um, she came back from a year of a lot of criticism before, and she rose to the occasion. She's the most decorated gymnast ever, and I'm so happy for her. I'm so proud of her. But what I'm also glad that her story has done for so many of us is it allowed us to lean in even deeper to this notion of well-being, self-care, and not being afraid of that being the reasons that we may end up deciding to pull away from something. And it doesn't mean that has to be the end of that something, right? And she's proven that for us. And so I just want to spend some time kind of acknowledging that. Have you been following the news on Simone?
Oh my gosh, I love everything about Simone. I want to be Simone. Yes, and I've been following her news since since what was it, Tokyo,
Yes,
when she pulled out, and it
yes,
became,
yes,
and she started a global conversation about
right.
wellness and health that was, until that point, there were such taboo topics to discuss. And so I mean, I think she represents such strength and power. But what I really love about the resilience that she has shown us is that it's been on her own terms.
On her
And
own terms.
it's not, not by an industry that is designed to, just like churn you out and, and suck the life out of you.
Right,
As
right.
many other industries are, she's been able to speak truth to power and has come out now stronger than ever, winning gold medals and doing it with joy and with strength.
Yes.
It is so beautiful to watch her.
I know it is. It has been really great to watch. She is, certainly created a movement that I think people are really receptive to, and rightfully so, because it's an important topic for us to continue to have, no matter if it's, Mental Health Awareness Month or not. We have to keep having these conversations all throughout the year. But I knew that story probably would resonate with you because, so for those of you who may not know, Daisy and I serve in a really intimate but very lovely brain trust group, and so I have gotten to see and hear some of your journey of how you stepped away and you really prioritize well-being and your health. And so, do you mind sharing a little bit of that with this community? I know you've been pretty vocal about it also on social media.
Yes, yes. I mean, I stepped away from my role last year from Vice Media and took a radical sabbatical. It's always, people look at the moment when you announce it as the start of it all, but that it took months to get there, right? It took months for me to plan what it would look like, but also to get the courage to
Mm,
actually step away. And it came from years and years of sustained stress and chronic health issues and realizing that I had been burnt out more times than I could think of. And that I was so caught up in this cycle of overwork and overcare, right? Just rallying emotionally around so many humans who needed that kind of support during the pandemic and during the racial reckoning that all the things that were the summer of 2020 plus, while also leading a global team across countries and geographies that I had team members that we didn't even share daylight hours with, right? And I had to build relationship with all of that weight. It became really unbearable, and
yeah,
I was not taking care of myself emotionally and physically and spiritually. And so I took a sabbatical, and during my sabbatical, I had actually not planned to do this, but this happened right at the beginning of my sabbatical. I got a book deal, and used that time to write my book, which is coming out in September, Burnt Out to Lit Up: How to Reignite the Joy of Leading People. And as you know, Nika, I wrote my first book, Inclusion Revolution, out of a fervent belief that organizational health, growth, and dynamism thrive where diversity
mhm,
and bloom. I know that. I've seen.
yeah,
I
yeah,
I drew on my own professional climb as a Latina executive working in DEI and people ops and organizational culture and executive leadership. Um, in an attempt to share what I had experienced and what I had seen was necessary in organizations across the entire employee life cycle, right? So it's a step-by-step blueprint. But then, as a practitioner of this work, I also know that, and you know this well, reshaping systems is relentless, right?
yes,
It is often fraught with setbacks, right? With skepticism, with resistance to change, with everything that we're experiencing right now. And it is in these moments, right? And I am a fervent advocate of this right now. It is in the moments that we live in right now that we have to carve out space for ourselves, to pause,
yes,
to reflect, to energize ourselves, to sometimes to find ourselves again.
mhm,
And to sustain the revolutionary work of anchoring DEI in
mm,
everything that we do. To do that, we have to stay strong and we have to be inspired.
yeah,
And so that's
absolutely.
why I wrote Burnt Out to Lit Up, helping us, and by sharing my stories, sharing the stories of others, sharing research backed tips and practices that can help us navigate the terrain of leading change and leading people skillfully while maintaining your humanity.
I love all of that, and I love for you that you were able to do that. And out of you taking care of self and your radical sabbatical, you have been able to now gift the rest of us with a tool because I can only imagine that it positioned you to be able to say yes to that book deal. I'm going to take this on right now because you had already been practicing rest and self-care and well-being. And now we have the benefit of being able to use that as a tool and a resource as we're trying to find that same level of balance and not being afraid or guilty about taking care of ourselves. We can't pour from an empty cup. And so I so love that. Now the book is available on pre-order now, but the actual release date is September what? Give us that date again.
It's out September 18, but
September 18th.
the lifeblood of new books is pre-order. So I ask everyone, it's
Yes.
on Amazon, it's on Bookshop, it's on Barnes and Noble. It is, I call it my no nonsense love letter to people managers, helping us reignite the joy of leading people because it is a calling. It is necessary, but to lead well, we have to live well. And I share practical strategies and I share lived experiences, and I do it from the lens of a woman of color. And I think that part of the reason, part of the my inspiration for writing these two books came about because I am a voracious reader, and I've read great books that I have learned so much from, but often had to apply a lens of I can't really quite do that way, because if I show up that way, people are going to see me as this brown skinned Latina in a very different way. So I have to apply it this way. And I wanted to read the book that spoke to me, right? That I could see myself in. And so that my two books are written, right? And I add Spanish in there, right? I add stories across intersectionality of women, because those are the experiences that I see less of out there, and particularly in the canon of management books. But we all know, we all work, we all lead, we all are deeply ambitious and want to grow in our careers, and it's helpful to know that somebody else has been there.
Yeah, no, 100%, absolutely. To lead well, we must live well. I did repeat that into the chat because I think it's so worthy of amplifying. And as you were talking about, I wrote the book that I needed, that I wanted. It reminds me of Toni Morrison. I think that she put that out there to the world. She said, "You write the book that you feel like you want to read because there's a need for it." And it certainly will also resonate with others. So we did also share the book link into the chat. I hope that you all will take advantage of that. I want to echo what Daisy has shared. As an author, it is incredible gift when you do the pre-orders, because that is so, so, so important. So support, support, support. And I'm sure we'll be hearing more about it coming up. So I want to go ahead and give the audience just a heads up that we're going to soon be shifting to take your questions, your comments, whatever curiosities are percolating for you, get those in mind. I will invite you to share. If you're a part of our Zoom community, you can use the raise hand feature, and that lets me know that you're willing to be invited to unmute yourself to present your question or comments directly, or just go to the chat if you'd like, and we'll present your questions on your behalf. If you're part of our LinkedIn Live community, we haven't forgotten about you. Go to the comment section, add your questions there, and we will, of course, make sure that they are brought to the conversation as well. While you're percolating on maybe what you want to ask or share and contribute to this conversation, I want to go to the next question for Daisy. And so, Daisy, you have had such deep experience in this space, and I shared all of that as I was reading your bio at the beginning. I want to understand, what are you seeing that has been some of the biggest mistakes that organizations are making around really effecting change in an impactful way from a DEI perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally is not acknowledging the truths about this work. I think we start by addressing the wrong problems.
Yeah,
DEI efforts, there's this tendency to focus on representation while overlooking root causes.
absolutely. Yeah.
We like to ask, how do we bring in more diverse people into this organization? We don't like to ask, why aren't more diverse people coming to this organization? Why aren't
Yes.
diverse people thriving in this organization, right?
Yeah.
emphasis that lies on recruiting underrepresented individuals does not sufficiently pay attention to the success once they join. And so that I think it's a perennial challenge in this work. I think that we also lack a shared understanding of what DEI means. The average white male is often thinking, I'm a white man, I feel like I can't do anything right, I'm on the wrong side of diversity, why should I even engage? But there's only one side to this work, right? I was like, and it's one where everyone feels included and that they belong. That's
Right.
what work is about, right? The misconception, right? And we talked about it at the beginning of this talk, right? These one-liners that that the opposition, if you will, and that folks like to throw out there, all of that moves us away from the understanding that we need a collective, inclusive approach to DEI, right? That involves everyone, and that
Everyone.
when we get this right, it's good for everyone, right? This is about lifting all boats, and so that piece is always challenging. And I would say the third part of it is the fatigue that comes from the multifaceted battle that it takes, right? It's overwhelmed by the complexity of DEI and the fear of making mistakes, right, against a daunting array of issues. I wrote a piece years ago for the Harvard Business Review, and it was about the one thing that I find most people struggle with is fear of saying the wrong thing, not saying enough, doing the wrong thing, not doing enough, right? And we sit in this fear, and we just don't take action because there's so many different things that we can do, right? And that then can get compounded in organizations and institutions by internal disagreement about what you prioritize, so that it leads to this, and then you don't do anything.
You don't do anything.
Right. So it's being able to carve out what those priorities are. And the way that you do that is we tend to be so external about this, like what are other people doing, instead of really digging into who do we want to be as an organization.
Oh, exactly.
We want to show up. Who are the people that we want to bring to this organization, and how do we ensure that they are successful to deliver on our mission and our goals? That's the central thesis.
I so resonate with that. It's one of the reasons that at our organization, we don't do benchmarking, at least not benchmarking in the traditional sense, because I'm like, well, you're benchmarking what, to see if you're better than someone else? If you have room for growth and improvement, it doesn't matter how someone else is performing, right? You need to make sure that you are continuing to catapult your efforts to the next level to be the best you can be for all of the people that are affiliated and associated with your organization. So I so align with that philosophy. I'm not seeing any hands raised, but I want to go to another question. And this relates to the climate we're in right now. There are a lot of people who are keenly aware that women of color, particularly Black women right now, are being they're being criticized. The scrutiny is just at a high level right now because of this, high stakes election. So for those who are sitting back thinking, how can I be an accomplice and how can I serve as an ally? What are some of the ways in which you have been, coaching or directing people to show up for women of color, Black women during this time where we know they are not being protected, even at a higher intensity than maybe outside of this election period?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is work that has to be very personal, and that has to be internal, right? The pursuit of DEI isn't just a goal, which is how it gets communicated often, right? It's a shared responsibility. It's a business necessity and an organizational necessity, but it's also a moral imperative. But most of us get stuck in this formulation of goals, like what am I supposed to go after, without really addressing the why and the what. So for anyone who want to be an ally or an accomplice, which is my favorite word. I always start by trying to understand, like, what does being an ally mean to you, right? For me, being an ally means sacrificing my comfort for someone else's, right? How do I leverage my power, whether it be positional privilege, whether it be the role that I play, the resources that I have, how can I use that for someone who has less of that? And those are those simple moments, right? And when you're in meetings, and any of us who have been in meetings and know someone junior who says something and nobody pays attention to it, and the tremendous credibility that we can offer to them by just saying, what Carmen just said was a really valid point. And like to plus one it, or I'd like us to actually carve out some time to really dig into it, because I think that there's something there that we haven't discussed, right? That's how an ally shows up, right? And so you need to really, understand what's the role that you want to play, right? You have to ask yourself, what are the aspects of this work that energize me, and what are the aspects that intimidate me, right? Like what
Yeah,
am I scared of, right? Like you have to dig through that, because that's where the inaction sits, when we spend all this time in our fear and our anxieties, instead of actually really leaning into what energizes us and acknowledging what may scare us, but like being willing to walk into those moments of discomfort.
right.
Because so many of us navigate discomfort on a daily basis, right? And for you to navigate a little bit of discomfort in that moment, right? It's like you'll live. It's like you'll
You'll
be
live.
a tremendous, but think about the tremendous impact that you may have.
Yeah.
The big piece is, it's we have to draw our knowledge and our insights from a wide variety of industries, fields, and experts. And so, believe like going to one panel, just having this conversation is not enough, right? You have to
Hmm.
do this work to be an ally, to support others. You have to draw knowledge and information so that you can be informed about what's truly happening in your community. And some of that is actually by talking to the people, on
Absolutely.
talking to your colleagues, right? Like drawing that kind of information that sometimes we're embarrassed to ask. But I'll give you a simple example, because it's August already, which is wild, but next month is Hispanic Heritage Month. And one of the questions I often get asked is like what can we call you? Latina, Hispanic, Latinx, Latine? And I'm of the mind, I was like, you can call me all the things. Like I don't care. Like, I think there's value in all of them. But sometimes we get so worried about asking the questions, like, you will not offend me if you ask me that question. Actually,
Mhm.
it can create a space for a conversation that we haven't had before. So
Yes.
ask the questions that you may feel are really silly, because very rarely will they be offensive, right? Sometimes they are, right? So, watch yourself on that front. But I was like, but very rarely are they're moments to actually build proximity and connection. And so draw knowledge from the places that are right in front of you, and widely. And then really just think about, what are the stories, the narratives, the perspectives that you are considering, and which are the ones that you are overlooking. Because
Um,
there's a lot that we take in, and then there's others that we overlook for a host of reasons, right? Because they're uncomfortable, because they're distant to us, because we just don't get them right away. But oftentimes those are the narratives and the perspectives that help us build a much broader picture of what's at stake. So what do I know, and what am I overlooking?
yeah. What do I know and what I'm overlooking? I love that. So much of this work is about navigating people's discomfort to get them to a place where they feel, um, greater inclined to engage, because without the engagement, they're sitting on the sidelines and nothing's changing. But even in that discomfort, and I know that's a sacrifice, I know that's a risk, but it is a risk worth taking, because literally lives are at stake when we think about this type of work. So I appreciate you bringing sacrifice as one of those key elements that someone who is desiring to be a true and effective ally or accomplice, to make sure they're counting the cost around. Because yeah, it's not just about the sentiments of you thinking that we all need to be treated, with great level of equity. It's about, what are you doing? What are you risking? What sacrifice are you willing to make? And I think that's a important distinction to bring to the conversation. You also brought to mind one of my favorite questions of asking people when I am really trying to stand in solidarity with them and to help. And that is, we can't assume that we know how to best support people. So simply just asking, what does support look like for you in this moment? That is one of my favorite questions that I think adds a lot of value to someone feeling a sense of trust, and to someone feeling freedom and agency to really fully express what they need. Sometimes the challenge is we're afraid to express what we need. And
Mhm.
there's nothing at all that's wrong with that. So I see your book in the background, Inclusion Revolution. Of course, we talked about your new one that's coming out in September. I do want to give some time, though, for you to share with us a little bit more about Inclusion Revolution. What was the inspiration for it? And maybe what's one or two key takeaways that if people pick up that book, they're going to walk away with?
Sure. Well, the inspiration for it, as I mentioned earlier, was reading all of these books for years about DEI, and not seeing myself and not seeing so many others that were in this space in those books. And so I started, like many, and people ask me, like, how do you write a book? And I was like, you just start writing, right? So I just started writing, I started publishing, and social media and whatnot, and, and started seeing what was of interest to people. And then I just, convinced myself, I was like, I've got a story to tell. I found an amazing agent, and an amazing editor, and then just started, and then found a great publisher, right? And then just started doing the work. But for me, Inclusion Revolution was always meant to be a practical guide.
Yes.
I believe in storytelling to
Yeah.
contextualize and to inspire people. And I'm very, very practical. Right? I was like, okay, what are the things that I need, right? What do I borrow from? What do I add to my toolkit? So I wanted Inclusion Revolution to be just another one of the tools that you add in your toolkit.
Yep.
And I framed it across the entire employee life cycle, from recruitment to onboarding, which is often, just so underinvested in, to performance reviews, to listening to employees and driving operational changes within organizations, to to an employee's last day. But the one thing that I constantly thought of, the framework for the book was built on a 4-step framework that I've leaned on throughout my career, in DEI, but also just in life. And it's reflect, vision, act, and persist. And so what if anything, it's the ability to be able to spend deep time, and we've talked about this already, because I'm a big supporter of reflecting on, what's the role that you want to play? What are the things that scare you? What are the things that energize you? What is possible in your organization, right? What does that look like? Like spending that time to really dig through, how do I want to show up in this work? What does that mean for me? And then the vision piece, I think about it in terms of, corporate talk and, strategic planning, if you will. I was like, that's your backwards calendar, right? It's like, I want to, what are the things I need to do to get
To get
there?
there.
And that's when, I don't know about all of you, I love a good backwards plan. I love KPIs, right? I love knowing where do I go to, right? So the visualizing piece is a little dreamy, right? But it's not just the woo-woo stuff, right? It's I
Right.
want to there. I want to build equity and inclusion across these parameters, and this is what I'm going to get to. And then the action is what we do the things, right? And for me, the action that's the grand experiment. That's the testing. That's the iterating. That's the putting recruitment plans in place and onboarding plans in place and professional development plans in place. It's figuring out what pay equity means for you and your organization. It's, putting all of these elements in place and testing it out. And then the 4th step, that's the step that we're always in, is that's persistence, right? That is what Simone Biles has taught us, right?
Yes.
That
Yes.
persistence doesn't show up like in one moment, right? Persistence is not something that comes up just, I'm just going to do it now and then I'm done, right? It takes time. It takes time to recover, right? From failures and mistakes and moments in our lives. And persistence is that constant reminder that, and it's like the common phrase that most DEI practitioners use, right? It's the Sisyphus comment, right? I was like, we're constantly pushing that boulder, come back, and we come
Yeah.
back up, right? But I was like, but I know, I have visualized, I have reflected, I know where I'm at, and I believe in this work. And if I need to iterate along the way, if I need to adjust and change and improve some things and give up on some things that don't make sense for this moment, I'm like, I'll do that, but I am still persisting. I know where I'm going. And that's what I hope that people get from this book, an ability to build their own framework for what DEI looks like in their lives and work.
Yeah, I hope they get that too, Daisy, because the persistence piece, staying to course is so important, because if something doesn't work, oftentimes what do? We'll just kind of abandon the plan and say, okay, oh, well, it didn't work. Let's move on. And we have to, if you have to modify, as you've shared, but let's make sure we stay to course and we persist. That is such a great message for this time in general that we find ourselves in. So we do have a question that's come from our LinkedIn Live audience, Jaleesa Dallas. So thank you so much, Jaleesa. Her question is, can you share your perspective, Daisy, on the positive impact of vulnerability in the DEI space, and specifically its correlation to self-care and being an example of holistic well-being? That's a beautiful question, Jaleesa.
I love that question, Jalissa. Thank you. I've often said that vulnerability does not diminish my leadership. It actually enhances it.
I think so too. Yeah.
It humanizes me and, and us, right? Because we are in relation to each other, right?
Yeah.
It's Ubuntu. I am because of you, right? It is that is what truly defines who we are as humans. And so, and I think that, listen, vulnerability is different for everyone. I
Yeah.
share a lot about my lived experience and my challenges. Not everyone feels that level of comfort. But I do believe, and I've learned, and I write about this in Burnt Out to Lit Up. I share a story when one of my team members came to me during a particularly rough time where I was deeply burnt out, but I just kept on like coming and doing and doing and doing. And she paused and she said, the team is worried about you. I'm worried about you.
Mm,
How can we help you? And I had
mm,
all caught up in the rallying for them and rallying for everyone and just getting things done that I hadn't had a moment to be and apply my vulnerability and be able to say, like, I'm just done, right? Like I am just,
yeah.
and I needed a mirror, right? I needed someone with kindness and love and someone that reported to me. So from an organizational structure, right? That these are the times when we think like, no, we can't tell our teams that we're wrong,
Right.
struggling. But here's the secret no one likes to admit. Our teams already know we're wrong. They know
So
when
true.
our teams
So
already
true.
tired, right?
Yeah.
We're faking the funk here, right? We're just operating in a space and all we're doing is debilitating ourselves and those around us. And we're not
Yeah.
modeling the right behaviors. And so for me, that lesson and many others like that are the ones that I lean on when I model vulnerability, when I model acknowledging today, I'm just not going to be 100%, right? I used to call it
Yeah.
today I'm going to be mediocre. And it was, for me, that was a coded and loaded word because as an immigrant, like the last thing we can be as an immigrant of color, the last thing I can be is mediocre, right? I have to show up at 150%, but
Right.
150% is sucking the life out of me. And I
Mhm.
be good for anyone if I am not healthy and if I am not well. So I do believe that there is a deep correlation, Jalissa. I think that our vulnerability allows us to say the things that have been hidden for so long, but that are our truth. The reason why I say the things the way I do now, and the reason why I share this is because I just started like in small little parts, right? This has been years of me saying
Wow.
some things that that I would say, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna get fired for this, or someone's not gonna respect me. And then I would have a million people go like, I feel just like you, right? And
Yeah.
how powerful is it when people see each other in each other, right? When I announced that I was going on a radical sabbatical last year, I was worried because the news had already leaked because that was the nature of the job that I had. And I had started already getting some hate mail about like, how dare you take a radical, like, who do you think you are? And I decided to post my story because I decided to own my story. I was like,
I
nobody else,
remember that.
I'm going to tell people why I took a radical sabbatical. And I remember once I hit post, I just like braced myself. I'm like, oh my God, what's coming at me? And what came at me was so much love, so
Mhm.
much curiosity, and so much truth about, oh my gosh, like you're saying, like I took a sabbatical and I didn't tell anybody, right? Right. All of these moments that I felt like were so liberating for me and for the folks that were talking to me. And that was another step in my own journey of sharing my vulnerability and sharing my truth, because I know that it is valuable for others, and it is also part of my own liberation.
Own your narrative. I love that. I remember when you came out with that message, and it was just a groundswell of support. I saw all the messages and all the responses, and I think that it also gave others permission to lean into considering that for themselves, which was a beautiful gift. So this has been a great conversation, Daisy. I want to thank you for being here with us today, for sharing so freely and generously with all of the great insights with our podcast community. We have placed into the chat the books. Of course, we've talked about Inclusion Revolution. It's already out out there now. So if you can't wait till September, just go ahead and read that one. But do not at all miss the opportunity to pre-order your copy of Burnt Out to Lit Up. Again, those links are into the chat. I want to give you, Daisy, an opportunity to close us out in whatever way that feels appropriate. But thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. I want to say thank you for having me. Thank you for joining, everyone. This world that we live in is messy. This election cycle will be messier, and it's going to continue to test our empathy, our grace, and our knowledge. This DEI climate is going to continue to shift, but this is not uncharted territory. Many of us have been through this. The path has always been fraught with challenges, but change remains possible. So my ask of all of you is to hold hands, to support each other, to take care of each other, and to stay in it, because this is what generations after us will thank us for.
Absolutely beautiful stated. Have a great and healthy weekend, everyone. We hope to see you back here next week for another episode of Intentional Conversations VodCast.
Thank you, everyone.